Well, thank you so much for coming in
My
and
pleasure.
joining us.
Thank you.
I want to set the scene for our viewers. As we speak, the House Intelligence Committee has wrapped 2 weeks of public testimony, and we're now in the Thanksgiving break. In August, you said you supported the impeachment inquiry. Where do you stand now?
I support the impeachment inquiry. And I should add that I'm thoroughly impressed and appreciative of the work that our chairman, Adam Schiff, has done. He has brought just amazing professionalism to those hearings, and I couldn't be prouder to serve with him. So I think that's what the American people needed to see. And the transparency, letting them hear the truth from the witnesses that were brought into the hearing room, and I'm appreciative of all the work that everyone has done on this.
Do you feel as though you've heard enough to actually say that you'll vote for impeachment and that he should be removed from office?
You know, when you have people testifying that they heard the president over the phone, essentially, you know, asking the president of Ukraine to do his political bidding, it's pretty clear that, you know, he's bribing the president of Ukraine. You know, do me a favor though, before I let the funding that Congress appropriated to you. It's no one is above the law. And yes, the president needs to be held accountable.
Okay. Do you think, feel the same way if there wasn't a presidential election next year? Obviously, the idea that, well, maybe you could just vote him out 6, 8 months later would be a factor.
So, well, I mean, the United States Congress has a duty to hold the president, the administration accountable. That is one of our charges under the Constitution of the United States, and we have an obligation to the people of this country. I don't think we should let politics enter into this issue right now, right? Like thinking, oh, well, there's an election coming around the corner. We have an obligation right now, and I think we need to exercise it.
The woman you've endorsed in the Democratic race for president certainly has been one of the early goers for impeachment. She said even before we knew about this phone call that there was reason enough with the Mueller report to impeach him. You did jump in pretty early to endorse. What sealed it for you?
For my endorsement of Elizabeth Warren? Well, she's a friend of mine. She is a champion for working families. I mean, she's outspoken. She's working so hard to make sure that working families have opportunities at success. As she says, the government works great for those at the top. It doesn't work too well for folks who aren't making enough money, even though they're working 40 hours a week or more. She's also been a strong ally for Indian country. Right now, her and I have several bills that we've co-sponsored together. One of those is the Honoring Promises to Native Nations Act. That's to make sure that the U.S. government keeps its trust obligations to tribes. Another one is a universal child care bill that will help every single parent in this country to find child care, you know, and sometimes that is the biggest worry that parents have. And she is an undisputed champion of working families. There was nobody better for me to endorse.
Do you think you'll be active on the campaign trail in some of these early?
I have, yes, okay, I have been already. Yes, I've gone to Ohio twice. I'm sorry, Iowa twice. I've gone to Iowa twice. I went to South Carolina a couple of weeks ago to, you know, just to help her with house parties and talking to volunteers and voters and, you know, holding events. I love campaigning. I've done it for a long time here in New Mexico for almost the past 20 years, working to get folks out to vote all over the state. And so I enjoy campaign season.
You enjoy campaign
I do.
season. And you told me before we taped you enjoy Washington, D.C.
I do. I know, you
Not a
know,
lot of people
you
say
probably
those
don't
things.
hear that often. No, Washington, D.C., you know, my dad was a 30-year career Marine, and he was stationed at Quantico, Virginia. That's the Marine Corps base near D.C., and he was also stationed at Virginia Beach. So we spent a lot of time in D.C. when I was a kid. That's, you know, when you used to be able to drive up to the White House and go inside.
Oh, sure.
Now you can't do that anymore. And so I essentially grew up in the area a lot of my childhood, and it's changed a lot, but it's the same. And I just admire how hard everybody's working to move our country forward, and you know, they're there in D.C.
Sure. Well, we have a few things that we want to get to today. I want to talk to you about rural broadband, about missing and murdered Indigenous women, about climate change, and maybe a little nuclear storage. I will let you choose where you'd like to start.
Did you say missing and murdered?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's start there.
Yeah.
Let's start there, because that moves into broadband also, right?
Okay.
Like
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
communication and connectedness is something that will help that issue.
And data, we spoke in July to a couple of advocates, Christina Castro and Cheyenne Antonio, about this, and they said that one of the biggest challenges was getting data, was sort of recognizing the scope of the problem. How do you feel we're doing in that respect?
So I just want to make sure that everyone knows that this issue, missing and murdered Indigenous women, it's an issue that's been ongoing since the Europeans came to this country in the late 1400s. It's not a couple generations old issue. It's a crisis that has been in the making for centuries. And, you know, we think about Sacagawea, who went with Lewis and Clark on that, you know, she's portrayed as, oh, she just went with them because she wanted to help them. Yes, but I mean, what really happened there, right? She was taken away from her community and her family to traverse the entire country. This is an issue that's been ongoing. There's no question that genocide was committed on Native Americans here in this country when Europeans came to make way for you know, the United States. And so it's not like one bill isn't going to fix this. It's going to be a series of things. And I want to start real quick with the Not Invisible Act of 2019. That was an historic bill co-sponsored by the 4 enrolled members of Indian tribes in the Congress, Tom Cole, Mark Wayne Mullen, Sharice Davids, and myself. That will create a committee of law enforcement officers, tribal leaders, advocates, victims advocates, and victims or their families to essentially tell Congress what it is we need to do. I think those voices are important in you know, flagging things that perhaps we would miss because we're not on the ground the same way they are. Okay. So that's an important issue. We also have there were two amendments that I have in the Violence Against Women Act that is going through the ringer right now on the Republican side because the bipartisan bill that we passed in the House is not the one that some Republicans are putting up right now. But we need funding to make sure that victims of violence, urban Indians who are victims of violence in state courts have victim advocate services, and that we're also, you know, they can also advocate for funding for programs and so forth. So, all of those things. We have Savannah's Act. That's the data sharing bill. That's also important. The Badges Act will streamline the way that the federal government hires Bureau of Indian Affairs police officers, which there's a shortage of right now.
A huge shortage.
Yes, yes. And I mean, you think about here in New Mexico, if I were to stand in the middle of the Navajo Nation, even in my district, and you know, try to call 911 if I were being in danger of being assaulted, I likely wouldn't get any bars on my phone. So, and even if I did, calling the BIA police, it could take them 2 or 3 hours to get to the location. So, so we need more law enforcement in tribal communities. And with respect to the Violence Against Women Act, it's imperative that we pass the bipartisan bill that was passed in the House. The Republican bill that the Republicans put up, I think they filed it yesterday during Native American Heritage Month, which was a little ironic. It really strips tribal courts of their ability to prosecute people who commit crimes, violent crimes against Native women on tribal lands. So, we just continually need to fight for this issue. Yeah, so we're making some headway, but it's not, you know, it's not going to be an overnight fix. It's going to take a long time for us to move this forward. And going back real quick to the Honoring Promises to Native Nations Act, one component of that funding bill, that appropriations bill, will be for public safety in Indian country.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
There are the legislative ways to address this that you just talked about. There's kind of the on-the-ground coordination aspect of it within your district, too. Do you feel like locally the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, are they paying enough attention to this?
No. No, they're not. The FBI needs to pay more attention to this. You know, when I think about the FBI got its start solving the Osage murders. It really honed its investigative skills by investigating the murders that happened on the Osage Nation back in the early 1900s. And so I think the FBI, they could probably, if they were able to really concentrate on this issue, they could probably do some good, right? Currently, the FBI sort of picks and chooses the crimes that it investigates in Indian country right now, and so, you know, missing persons. I mean, that's usually a lot of times that's how a missing and murdered Indigenous women case will start. Is, oh, you know, we haven't seen our cousin for 3 days, and is that right? Is that an issue? Is that a case that the FBI will come out and start investigating immediately? So you know, we need to just be aware of how, you know, the nuances of every single piece of the issue, and just work towards solving it.
Is there, speaking just kind of generally, do you have a preferred approach to solving some of the issues that come before you legislatively, or sort of acting as that project manager within your district?
So I think that we do need legislation, and we need funding legislation. Okay. Indian country is drastically underfunded when it comes to public safety. You know, tribal courts, I'll give you an idea. When I was in law school, I graduated in 2006. I think I did my clinic in 2005. I held the first jury trial as a student attorney out at Laguna Tribal Court. The very first criminal jury trial. They had never had one there before. They're using the jury box for a storage space.
Wow.
And so there are a lot of tribal courts around the country that need funding so they can exercise their ability to try cases, and to, you know, the courts are, they need to be exercised. They need to be used so that they can perfect, you know, their systems and things like that. So, I'm completely in favor of making sure that the federal government lives up to its trust responsibility and funds these programs within Indian country, and absolutely one of those is public safety, and of course the other is the justice systems.
Sure, sure. Rural broadband touches a little bit on that, and also impacts everyone. You know, you look at the southeast corner of your district. You know, that deals with some access issues as well. Where are we on that? What are you pushing for?
Well, I mean, we need it. Right? I'm just pushing for it all the time. And it's not just, you know, I was the other day I was giving a speech somewhere, and I said, every single, myself, Ben Ray Lujan, Xochitl, Torres Mall, every single one of us have rural communities in our districts. Every single one of us. New Mexico is mostly rural. We are, you drive 10 minutes out of Albuquerque and you're in a rural community. The broadband, cell phone towers, all these communication have always been a challenge for us, and we just need to get it done. I feel fortunate that Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham she's dedicated to this issue as well, and so we'll work together to just keep that moving forward.
Do you have a sense of what the best way to kind of address that in terms of funding is? You look up in Representative Lujan's district in Espanola, they ran into some real issues with the $10 million grant up near Espanola, and they didn't end up with near the kind of fiber optic infrastructure they wanted because there wasn't sort of oversight of the agencies that were implementing these grants. Is there a better way to approach that?
Well, I'm sure with respect to that issue, right, we learned from that hopefully. So I assume that, look, nobody wants to waste taxpayer money, right? We all want our projects to work well. Sometimes perhaps you learn from your mistakes, so to speak. So I think we'll know better moving forward, and we just need to get moving on it, right? And I think at this point, the federal government needs to fund projects that will connect people.
Okay.
Because it means the world to students, right? Having internet service is imperative for educational opportunities. It's imperative for healthcare with all of the telemedicine and this wonderful ECHO program that we have going right now at UNM. It is imperative. That could be a gateway to healing our communities in so many ways, and so we just I think we have an obligation to see it through and make it work.
Okay, we just have a couple minutes left here already, but I did want to talk about climate change. One of the things that strikes me is I'm just not sure why we're still debating this.
I'm not sure either.
Society.
Right, I'm not sure either. I know why we're still debating it. It's because there are people in this country who are working very, very hard to protect the gas and oil industry without reservation. And I personally feel, yes, we have a big gas and oil industry here in New Mexico.
Exactly.
I don't think the gas and oil industry needs to frack and drill in every single inch of our state. And not only that, but they have an obligation to have a clean industry. And we know that there's a big methane cloud floating above northwestern New Mexico that needs to be cleaned up. And so I think we can explore renewable energy revolution in New Mexico at the same time that the gas and oil industry is working very hard, as they should be, to clean up their industry, to keep the methane from leaking out of those pipes and all of these things. But we can explore renewable energy. We can make renewable energy a reality. It's cheaper, it's cleaner, it will create thousands of jobs right here in New Mexico. We can do both of those things at the same time. That's
kind of one of the things that I wanted to touch on before we wind up here, is that there seems to be this idea that perhaps we're kidding ourselves, that there's a way out of this that doesn't hurt economically. Do you feel like there's enough job growth potential there in renewables that that we can sort of work on solving the climate crisis?
I absolutely do, and we need to have an infrastructure package in the federal government that will make sure that states and communities have the resources to build that infrastructure, right? Think about right now, we have a bill in the Congress that I think we filed yesterday. It's to move all of our federal buildings toward 100% renewable energy. How many people do you think it would employ to retrofit every single federal building in the country
Sure.
for solar panels or whatever it is that we're doing. I think it will create a lot of jobs, more than people realize. But I feel like we've had enough of excuses. Our planet's burning up, right? There's wildfires everywhere. There were fires in Alaska, of all places, this past summer. We've seen temperatures that should scare anybody in places where it should not be, where temperature should not be rising. And so we have got to do something about climate change. It's undeniable. Every single day you pick up the newspaper, there's a story on the effects of climate change and how and the sad part of it is that it affects the folks who can least afford it, right?
Sure.
So we have an obligation, I think, to remedy this do whatever we can to remedy the situation.
We thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time, and we
Thank
look
you.
forward to sitting down with you again.
Thank you.
You bet.